A certain type of wood can dull a chainsaw chain with just one cut. It has been used to make fence posts that have stood on bare ground for more than a century. No coating, no preservative, and no treatment. It approaches the energy density of coal and burns hotter than any tree in North America. A single bee carved from it was exchanged for a horse by indigenous cultures. And by 1869, the American Midwest was lined with 60,000 meters of live fence constructed from this tree. The steel industry then emerged. They sold you something worse, tore it out, and passed legislation requiring its removal. This is how the continent's most resilient wood was destroyed and why it refused to die. On the outskirts of the biggest property purchase in American history, the archive opens in March 1804 in the city of St. Louis. Meriwether Lewis, a young officer, is getting ready to set out on the journey that would change his life. However, he does something strange before venturing out into the unknown. He addresses a package to the President of the United States, wraps a bundle of cuttings and seeds in moist fabric, and ships it east. The samples are from the garden of Pierre Couteau, a longtime resident of the Osage Nation and a French fur trader. Couteau bought them from an Osage man who informed him that the trees grow in the Red River Valley's bottomlands some 300 meters to the west. Lewis explains their importance in a letter to Thomas Jefferson. He claims that the Osage people travel hundreds of miles in search of this tree's wood because they value it so highly for constructing their bows. At Monticello, Jefferson plants the cuttings. The information survives, but the majority do not. This tree was already named by the French. They referred to it as wood of the bough, or badark. The pronunciation would be muddled by American settlers into something more straightforward, bodark. Later on, scientists would categorize it as Maclura pomifera. However, you refer to it by a different name. The fruit is familiar to you. Every fall, you've seen it in ditches and at the sides of roadways from Texas to the Great Lakes. A softball-sized, bright green spherical, with ridges and bumps that resemble the surface of a brain. It could be referred to as a monkey brain, a hedge apple, or a horse apple. It's an Osage Orange. Additionally, the most resilient wood on the North American continent is used to make the fruit that kids toss at one another in October. Parts of eastern Texas, southeastern Oklahoma, and southwestern Arkansas made up its incredibly limited native range, an area no broader than 300 meters. Among the major trees on the continent, it has one of the most restricted ranges. However, indigenous networks spanning the Great Plains were used to trade its timber. Due to human desire, a tree that was limited to a small area of riverbank bottomland became one of the most sought-after commodities in pre-continental America. It wasn't a resource that was marginal. The infrastructure was strategic. And those whose names were firmly affixed to the tree were the ones who understood this the best. The Osage and Oage tribe ruled over what is now Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. The groves that any Great Plains bower or need were located inside that region. The top bowwood on the central continent was Osage Orange. Its mix of traits was unmatched by any other natural species. The wood may bend under draw without taking a permanent set since it is both dense and flexible. The Dishnell Nation find then retaliating with enough saved energy to pierce a bison's ribcage with an arrow. After weeks of meticulous work, a suitably seasoned Osage Orange stave was bent and tillered to create a bow that was on par with the English yew longbow bows that had won the battles of Agincourt and Cy. However, this timber was grown in North America, and those who oversaw its groves knew just how much it was worth. The story is told by trade economics. In plains trade, a single completed Osage Orange bow was worth a horse and a blanket. Think about what that implies. One bow carved from a single tree was worth the price of a live animal in a society where horses were seen as symbols of luxury, mobility, and military might. In order to obtain raw staves, tribes whose territory was hundreds of miles from the native range engaged in extensive trading. Osage Orange bows were employed by the Comanche. From Ohio's forests to the foothills of the Rockies, so did countries. Beyond bows, the wood fulfilled every function that required durability and impact resistance. Tool handles, lodge supports, and war clubs. It was almost unbreakable as a structural material because of the density that made it deadly in a bow. The Osage also saw something else. Although it wasn't a major food source for humans, the fruit included substances that kept insects away. They saw this tree not just as a supply of lumber, but as a whole system. However, the more profound realization was strategic. This wood was not just harvested by the Osage. They controlled who could access it. One aspect of tribal strength and trading leverage was control over the groves. A live tree was more valuable than anything a machine could produce, since it could replenish itself eternally and provide a material that no manufactured product could equal. A factory was never necessary for them. They possessed the tree. But the Osage would not be the ones to disperse it throughout a continent. For a reason the Osage never would have thought of, it would be the U.S. government. On the University of Wisconsin campus in Madison, the U.S. Department of Agriculture established a research center in 1910. The first and only government-financed wood usage research institution in the country, they named it the Forest Products Laboratory. Its simple goal was to evaluate all of America's commercially significant wood species and record their individual capabilities: rot resistance, strength, flexibility, hardness, and thermal output. First published in 1935 and regularly updated for almost a century, the measurements would go into the creation of the Wood Guidebook, the ultimate reference. Osage Orange was one of the species they investigated, and their measurements shouldn't have been achievable from a single tree. Durability was the first finding. Untreated Osage Orange fence posts were buried in the ground by researchers, the most severe test that a building material can undergo. Constant dampness, fungal invasion, insect pressure, and freeze-thaw cycles are all consequences of soil contact. In 3 to 5 years, untreated pine fails this test. The American benchmark for hardwood durability is white oak, which has a lifespan of 10 to 15 years. For 15 to 20 years of ground contact, pressure-treated lumber wood, injected with chemical preservatives under industrial force, is evaluated. The orange Osage post did not decay. Researchers discovered hardly no discernible deterioration after 25 years. After 50 years, the posts were still in place. Since then, field observations throughout the Great Plains have revealed Osage Orange corner posts that have endured for 75, 90, and amazing stories of more than a century in bare soil in southwest Iowa. Just the wood, with no covering, preservative, treatment, or field. Hardness was the second finding. The Jonah test determines the amount of power needed to embed a steel ball halfway in a piece of wood. About 1,360 pounds of force is registered by white oak. The strongest common hardwood in America, hickory, can exert 1,820 pounds of force. When Osage Orange was tested in the lab, the results showed about 2,620 pounds of force, a completely distinct category of material, rather than increasingly harder. Compared to white oak, the wood is 2.5 times harder. Osage Orange's dull chainsaw chains more quickly than any domestic species, according to long-standing reports from sawyers and loggers. Some refused to cut it without tools with carbide tips. Energy was the third discovery. Osage Orange provided the highest thermal output of any wood in North America at about 32.9 million BTUs per cord when researchers measured the thermal output of all the major American firewood species. A common fuel, red oak, yields about 24 million. The distinction is not insignificant. In the Midwest, traditionalists cautioned that Osage Orange could cause a cast iron stove to break. It is comparable to anthracite coal in terms of energy density. Growing in the wild, this species produces wood that outlasts treated lumber by a factor of 5, burns hotter than any tree on the continent, and destroys timber-specific cutting tools without the need for irrigation, fertilizer, or pesticides. This material would be considered a breakthrough if it were created in a lab. Such a remarkable substance does not quietly vanish from a culture. It must be forced out. And that's precisely what took place. The mania arrived before the erasure. Jonathan Baldwin Turner, a professor with a Yale education, quit his position as a lecturer at Illinois College in Jacksonville, Illinois, in 1847 to focus on an issue that was severely impeding the colonization of the American prairie. No fences were present. There was no timber for split rails in the meadows without trees. Legal borders, crop protection, and cattle containment were all impossible for settlers without fencing. Homesteaders would have to fence their claims under the Homestead Act of 1862. But with what? Turner knew the solution. Since the late 1830s, he had been working with Osage Orange, bringing in seed from Texas, creating planting methods, and even patenting a soil preparation and hedgerow seedling stitching machine. His requirements were straightforward. In 3 to 4 years, a single row of Osage Orange trees spaced 1 foot apart would create a barrier that was hog-tight, bull-strong, and horse-high. Cattle were stopped by the thorns alone. No animal could penetrate the wall formed by the intertwined branches. One newspaper referred to Turner's advertising as hedge mania. Osage Orange seed costs skyrocketed to $50 per bushel in the 1860s. The Northwest received 18,000 bushels of seed in a single year, enough to plant 100,000 meters of hedgerow, according to recent sources. In the Midwest and South, an estimated 60,000 miles of Osage Orange hedge had been planted by 1869. According to Michael Farrow, a researcher at Clemson University who wrote The Authoritative Cultural History of the Tree in 2014, some people believe that Osage Orange was just as crucial to the Midwest settlement as the railroad, the steel plow, and the windmill. The industry then pursued it. A farmer by the name of Joseph Glidden submitted a patent application for a novel product, modern barbed wire, in Decearber, Illinois in 1874. Within 10 years, wire fencing was being extensively marketed to railroads and ranchers by companies like Washburn and Moen, which were eventually merged into United States Steel. The pitch was straightforward. Installing barbed wire was less expensive. It was easier to move. In 1875, a Dealb correspondent wrote that two men could construct a 160-acre fence in 2 days, using the materials that could be transported in a typical buggy. The subsequent market shift was not a natural one. The erasure was institutional. In the 1880s and 1990s, state and local governments in the Midwest started enacting hedge ordinances that required farmers to remove or cut their Osage Orange hedge. The rationale changed as the audience did: fire risks, road expansion barriers, and rodent havens. Railroad firms changed their strategy and supported steel infrastructure after first planting Osage Orange for ties and windbreaks. Osage Orange was discreetly redefined as a nuisance species in USDA extension publications that had previously listed it as a useful hedge plant. The same organization that had aided in the tree's spread now advocated for its destruction by the early 1900s. The chemical industry entered the fight in the middle of the 20th century. During fence row cleanup initiatives supported by extension services, brush-killing herbicides such as 2,4-D and trichlor were used against remaining hedgerows. It was an easy argument. Hedgerows squandered arable land. Economic reasoning was never difficult. Today, the fence sector in the U.S. is worth more than $10 billion a year. Vinyl, composite panels, barbed wire, woven wire, and T-posts. Every product in the market needs to be manufactured, mined, shipped, and replaced every 15 to 30 years. None of those inputs are necessary for a living Osage Orange hedge, which endures forever. The lifespan of a dead Osage Orange post placed in bare ground is between 50 and 100 years. A material that never has to be replaced cannot be the foundation of a recurring revenue industry. To compete with a tree that grows for free, you cannot sell a manufactured good. They told you that the living fence was outdated and sold you barbed wire. They enacted legislation mandating that you remove any hedges that had fenced your property. The most resilient wood on the continent was reclassified as a nuisance species in extension bulletins that they produced. Products that rust, decay, and need to be replaced are the foundation of their $10 billion fencing industry. As all was going on, the tree that made it all unnecessary was waiting to be chopped down in the fence row. $10 billion. A guy called Hank Will loads a chainsaw and a jug of water into the bed of a 1964 International Harvester pickup and drives in low range to the bottom of a steep draw on his farm in Osage County, Kansas, which is named after the tree after the country that first appreciated it. The hedge is still present. The trees that his forebears planted over a century ago have matured from fencing to lumber. Will removes poles from them in the same manner that farmers in Kansas have done for decades, choosing straight trunks, debarking, felling, and allowing them to season. The price range for a good Osage Orange line post is $9 to $12. Will is not selling them, even if a corner post sells for $18 to $20. They are being used by him. Each sturdy wooden fence post from the lumberyard costs between $8 and $20. On sale, medium-duty T-posts cost roughly $4.50. He points out that in his area of Kansas, untreated hedge posts last around 30 years in the ground, and many live much longer. Generations. He is not by himself. At Homestead National Historical Park in southeast Nebraska, retired school principal Don McKinley documented corner posts that were placed 75 to 100 years ago, still standing on the fields where he grew up in southwestern Iowa. The original Osage Orange hedge, which was planted by homesteader Daniel Freeman in 1875, is preserved and restored by the National Park Service. It has endured for more than a century. It has been on the National Register of Historic Places for more than a century. When the hardware store supplied petroleum-based substitutes, Those who continued to cut posts from the same hedge their great-grandparents planted and burn Osage Orange in their stoves were written off as relics. They relied on a tree that was deemed unattractive. They were instructed to clear it by extension agents, relics. The world changed after that. Lumber that has been pressure-treated, the chemical industry's response to decay was scrutinized. Due to concerns about arsenic, CCA-treated wood coated with chromated copper arsenate was phased out for domestic usage in 2004. Questions about copper leaching are raised by its replacement, ACQ. Global supply channels cause fluctuations in steel pricing. In the meantime, the agroforestry and permaculture movements started to rediscover what the traditionalists already understood. Osage Orange is recommended as a permanent zero-input fencing solution in silvopasture systems by Mark Shepard, the proprietor of New Forest Farm in Viola, Wisconsin. The tree doesn't need a mine, a factory, or a supply chain. Permaculture. The history of the country would be very different if it were not for this tree. This is how Clemson University's Michael Farrow, who spent years researching the tree's cultural past, phrased it. Those who continued to use it were not behind. They had the upper hand. They attempted to remove it. The tree refused to comply. You have most likely stood within sight of an Origin orange tree without realizing it if you live anywhere from Texas to the Great Lakes. It is revealed by the fruit. Those softball-sized, vivid yellow-green spheres with ridges and lumps resembling brains cover the ground beneath female trees along roadsides, property boundaries, and old fence lines from September through November. Grab one. It weighs more than you anticipate. The pale, piffy inside leaks a sticky white latex if you crack it open. The scent is nice, almost floral, and somewhat citrusy. The seeds will be shredded by squirrels. Even though they are not poisonous, most people won't eat them. The tree itself is medium-sized, reaching a height of 30 to 50 feet when fully grown, with a spreading crown and deeply wrinkled orange-brown bark. Sharp thorns up to an inch long are carried by the branches. Unlike anything else in the American woodland, the newly exposed wood on a living branch is a startlingly bright golden orange. It eventually turns a deep, rich brown. The wood is there. It is sold as hedge or bow dark by specialty sawmills in the Midwest. Fence posts and firewood are available in rural ads on marketplace platforms in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Illinois. Get Osage Orange firewood if you see it on sale. Give it at least a year to season. Use it in stoves rated for high-heat hardwoods and avoid overloading the firebox because it burns hotter than any wood you have ever used. When old-timers claim that it can bend a grate, they are not lying. Cut, debark, and season fence posts. The wood will reject steel nails, so drill pilot holes before driving fasteners. Place them squarely in the ground. No coating, preservative, or treatment is required. You will not live as long as the wood. A word of warning. Skin irritation may result from the milky sap. When handling brush, wear thick gloves and protective eyewear because the thorns are severe and the wood will destroy your instruments. Use chains and blades with carbide tips or schedule frequent sharpening. A timber that shatters chainsaws. Posts that are more durable than the farmers who set them. A living fence that never needed a mine, a factory, or a new order. Because it didn't work, it wasn't deleted. Because it performed too well, it was removed. Furthermore, a product that lasts forever cannot be the basis for a recurring revenue business. There is still the tree. It has been anticipating. You are aware now. This fall, pick up any hedge apples you come across on the ground. The germ of the most resilient wood on the continent is in your hands. Plant it. This is how this knowledge endures.